Very special thanks to Cars of Somerset for providing the vehicle in this review, and of course they're based in Somerset as the name suggests, but in particular they are located in Ashcott. And if you want to buy this exact car or check out their ever-changing inventory of exotics, click the link right below this video and see what they've currently got. Any of you who have been following this channel, and especially the Beards and Cars review series therein, will probably know I'm a big fan of Maserati, and I've owned one, so I'm in a pretty unique position to actually not only be a super fan of the brand, but also openly contradict the things that they do wrong, because my Maserati was not great. I paid a decent price for it, it had a full service history, and it lasted about 3 months in my care. The gearbox stopped engaging drive or reverse, the engine started having issues, and ultimately I had to sell it and stick to my trusty Touareg V10. However, that was the biggest query that I had coming into this review. See, I've wanted to drive a Gran Turismo for quite some time, not just because it's a cool car, but because I had real valid concerns and questions about whether or not Maserati had improved things. And also, of course, to be able to tell those of you who, like myself, want to know that, as maybe a potential buyer, have things improved? Is this now a safer bet than it used to be? Because, spoiler alert, I'm not going to say that this Maserati is suddenly the most reliable option out there and that it's not going to cost you Aston Martin or, Porsche levels to service and maintain, because it will. It's an exotic, you should expect that. And if you're looking to have a lower budget, then of course go for something like a Jag XK, for example, as I did. In my case, an XKR 4.2. This one is a great rival, incidentally, to that Jag. Same kind of time period. It has a 4.2 litre Ferrari Maserati collab V8, naturally aspirated, 400 horsepower, no way near the kind of torque that I usually like, 333 pound-feet. Again, comparing that to my Jag, for example, the Jag has 416, so pretty huge difference. And that is something which I want to talk about in the video, because my Maserati, the Quattroporte, from, incidentally, the Cambia Corsa transmission era, which again we're going to talk about in a second because people have valid concerns about that, it just didn't feel grunty enough for my taste. It's this big, long, 4-door, nearly 2-ton limo, which has barely enough torque to get off the line without wheel spinning, because you have to rev so much higher than something like a supercharged V8 or, even a naturally aspirated V8 from Germany or America. You just end up spinning the wheels so easily, especially in less than stellar weather, which in the UK is most of the time. So it just didn't feel that usable to me. It's the kind of car that sounds fantastic in a tunnel, but you're not in a tunnel all the time. If you're just in a car park or driving through a city centre, you have no way near as much fun. To me, having so much more torque really does get the job done. It gives you more grunt off the line, it gives you better fuel economy, the advantages are endless. In the case of this car, even though the torque still isn't crazy, it does feel different. Now, it shares a same underlying platform as the Quattroporte did, albeit in an updated form, but it feels worlds apart. And this car actually had a really fast gestation period of about 9 months, from conception to actual production, and Ferrari basically shared the platform to make the California as well. And of course the California has way higher used values than these, mostly due to the badge. Now that's an interesting point, because Ferrari can have just as many issues and yet they manage to shake that off, whereas Maserati kind of lingers, and that was one of the questions I wanted to answer in my time driving the car. Does this feel and perform better than my Maserati did, than perhaps the 4200 did? Does this feel like what a Maserati should feel like, in my opinion? Well, spoiler alert, yeah, it really does. It feels fantastic. As soon as you sit in the car, it feels different. There's an air of quality that you can immediately see. Everything looks more sturdy, like more thought went into it, like it's not just overtly oddball in its stylish layout like the Quattroporte is, or certainly the 4200 GT with the swoopy dashboard and the crazy colours. No, this is a proper interior, almost German in its approach, but not to the point of being a fault. Because, as I've said before, I find German interiors sometimes a little boring, and I don't want that in a Maserati. This is a lovely place to be. Even stuff like plastics are used sparingly, and they blend into the style. And of course, the colour of black on black does make a difference to that, but still, it highlights my point that it looks and feels like an improvement already. The second thing is the gearbox. Gone is the Cambio Corsa, in is the ZF, and of course a number of brands use ZF, BMW, various others too. It's so much better. In auto mode, it's a proper automatic, and for those who don't know, you basically have to use the paddles all the time in a Cambio Corsa Maserati because it eats the clutch. Plus you have issues like the F1 pump, as many owners will know about, and although I'm not saying that a Gran Turismo doesn't have its own issues, of course they do, it just doesn't feel anywhere near as temperamental. I drove this car in -3, -4 degree weather. It started first time, after being sat there for, I don't know, a few days maybe, and it drove without any issue at all. I wouldn't even have that kind of confidence in my own car, let alone driving another vehicle like this one. It performed admirably. Not once did the tyres slip in the whole time I drove it. In, again, really bad weather and bad conditions. Even when I fully opened up the throttle, as you could see from that side view camera in the beginning of the video, it didn't step out at all. You could feel the traction control and stability manager keeping it straight and true, but still giving you that kind of shaking of the hips fun that you want to have when you floor your, in effect, super sports car. And of course, in terms of performance, it's never going to be a slouch. 0 to 60 is quicker than something like a Quattroporte, as you'd hope. 5 seconds dead to begin with. It goes lower if you get a Stradale or an S. Top speed, 180 miles an hour, even in what is quote-unquote the base model. Now, this one technically is a base model, and you're probably thinking, hang on a second, that doesn't look like a base model, it looks like a Stradale. Well, that's because this one does have some upgrades. Underneath, it is a 4.2 around 2008 model, so it would usually look like the normal Gran Turismo. This one, though, has the MC Stradale body kit. It has a CSK stainless exhaust system, which, as you can tell, sounds absolutely phenomenal, and the exhausts themselves are massive. And it also has various other upgrades like the suspension and the rims, TSW forged wheels, etc. So it's far from a stock vehicle, but it's still got the heart and soul of the original. It's not like some twin-turbo crazy conversion with a stripped-out interior and a totally new gearbox, so you can still tell what the underlying soul and character of the car is. And I have to say, the car put a smile on my face, consistently. And even though you can't see a smile on my face, I'm talking internally. Every minute that I spent with this car felt exactly like what I always wanted my other Maserati experiences to be like. None of the drama and all of the good stuff. Again, not saying it's never going to break, I'm just saying it already felt so much better. And for those who are interested in actually using their car every day, as I always do, well, there's even improvements there as well. One of the biggest disappointments for me in the 4200 era car, everything from the 32 to the 42 to the Grand Sport even, because they share the same body shell, was the space. It's not a small car, but it wasn't that great. Inside, you can kind of see in my review of it that I was kind of hunched over, and if not hunched, really close to the roof. The headroom was not great, the legroom was fine, width room was nothing to write home about, kind of 911-esque. This was much bigger, but not obscene. It felt very much like my Jag XKR, in fact. Perfectly proportioned. And speaking of my Jag, I honestly believe that that is this car's best rival. The XKR, be it the 5 litre or the 4.2, is such a perfect twin to the Maserati, because even though they do have a number of differences, the Maserati is far more Gothic and flamboyant and over the top with reliability issues. The Jag tends to be more sturdy and more stately, but they still make such good rivals in so many ways. And yes, that is a very direct teaser for a future rivals match you'll be able to find on the channel. So of course, if you want to see Maserati versus Jag, stick around for that. However, to return to the point of practicality, even the rear seats have so much more attention, even compared to my Jag. The rear seats in an XK or a, Porsche 911 for example, or whatever other 2+2 you want to bring up, they tend to be an afterthought. Technically they're 4-seaters, but not really, they're token seats for kids, and anyone with legs is going to have trouble fitting in the back. You do have some notable exceptions. The newer BMW 6 Series has great rear seats in my opinion. The Bentley Continental GT, those kind of really large 2+2s, a Mercedes CL class is another great example, but they tend to be such huge cars to be able to have that kind of space that you end up being really heavy and sometimes a little bit clumsy on a tighter road. Well, as you can see in this video, I'm driving the Maserati on pretty tight roads in pretty bad conditions, and it still felt great. The rear seats have so much more space than you'd realistically expect, and it makes the Quattroporte, in my opinion, feel almost irrelevant. This is so good as a 2+2 layout with the interior space and the trunk space, it almost deletes the need for 2 extra doors, because it literally does everything else the Quattroporte can do, but in my opinion looks even better than the newer Quattroportes do. In my opinion, the Maserati that I owned was the best looking Quattroporte you can find, and of course that's down to personal opinion, but again, that's what I'm talking about. Continuing on the point of practicality though, let's talk about stuff like fuel economy for just a second, and some people roll their eyes and say, oh, who cares about fuel economy, why would you buy a Maserati? Well, to me, as I've said before, if you can make a car that can do everything this can, but that also has good economy, or at least the potential of it, well, that impresses me more, not less. And I'm very happy to say that this is one of the few times where the real economy, reported by owners, actually, on average, exceeds what Maserati says it can do. See, officially, this is rated at doing 11 to the gallon in the city, which sounds about what you'd expect. 23 on the highway, which is fine. I used to get about 22 in my Quattroporte, and an average of 16. In comparison, my Jag, for instance, averages more like 23 to 25, so it's lower, as you'd expect. But if you, for instance, go to Honest John, an aggregator site which I like to reference in the Rivals series here on the channel multiple times, where owners can report the actual economy that they get and then it averages out to an overall score, well, it exceeds what they say it can do. They say an average of 16, most owners report overall an average of 23, 23.5 to the gallon, which puts it smack dab up against the Jag. That's really impressive. Now, we need to talk price as well, because of course a potential buyer could be thinking, well, which one do I go for? What kind of age? What should I be looking out for? Well, in terms of age, the production run was pretty long, over a decade in fact, from around 2007 up until 2019. It had a facelift, there were loads of different versions, S, Sport, Stradale, etc. This one, as I said, is the original quote-unquote base model, which in my opinion already offers so much to love that I don't even feel I would want any of the higher-ups, because this one is so much more affordable. Because if you go for one of those later models, you can quite easily still pay over 70 grand. For one of these though, well, these tend to range from about 18 to 28. That's much more modest, and it really depends on how much of a risk you're willing to take on, for instance, servicing, MOT history and mileage. And as I've said before on the channel, I don't put much credence into service histories anymore, because my Maserati had all the stamps and lasted 3 months, so it didn't mean anything. As I've said in at least one other video, my recommendation to you when buying any car is check out the car's MOT history, not its service history, because that shows you far more accurately what has and hasn't been done and what it has and hasn't failed on. Especially in the case of something like a Maserati, that can really help out. Now, in terms of possible long-term issues or reliability, some of the common stuff will be, for instance, hoses cracking and allowing coolant to come out, similar to what can happen in a Jag, for example, and obviously being a Ferrari engine mostly in terms of production and development. Again, expect potential issues there. It is Italian after all, and new or old, they're always going to have their issues. In terms of more specific things, of course, I always like to ask any potential owners or mechanics who've worked on multiple Maseratis or come across issues that you think people need to know about, to put them down in the comments. So if you're, for instance, in the market and you'd like to know, take a look below the video and see what people have written there. And of course, the single biggest thing to bear in mind about a car like this is, just like an Aston Martin, it will cost more to replace things, mostly because it's a specialist vehicle. Parts themselves won't necessarily always be that expensive. It's usually getting them fitted, be it awkward to reach or expensive to pay some specialist dealership to do, so those are the kind of things that you're going to need to bear in mind. In terms of the overall experience, mine was very positive with this car, and of course I don't own it, so I can't say in the long run, but again, that's where you in the comments come in. So overall, if you enjoyed this video and want to check out my other Maserati reviews for my own car and the 4200, click the playlist here on screen, and of course, be sure to stick around on the channel for more Maseratis in future, and also to check out the other cars which I've done, for instance the 911s, Jag XKs that I've referenced, and of course you can find all of those in that same playlist here on screen. But until next time, I'll see you then, and for now, as always, thanks for watching.